welcome to the Artist Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Chris Goslow, and I'm very happy today to have my special guest, Nolan Neikirk. Nolan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing lovely today.
Awesome. Nolan is someone I've known for several years now, and every time I hang out with him, I usually enjoy myself. And he is a novelist, and he's going to tell us about his writing or his other projects or whatever he really wants to talk to us about. But I just thought that he's very creative, he's fun to talk to, but also very productive. And I've always noticed that about him, that he's always working on something. His writing projects it's impressed me, and I thought he'd be a great subject for this podcast. And you are the first writer on this podcast, so welcome.
Oh, hello. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Nolan, talk to us first, because we're just getting to know you, at least anybody listening. Tell us what you have been up to as a writer, what you've been up to, what kind of projects, and, just a little more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've known each other for a long time, and we actually met through this writing group, Shut Up and Write, which is where I actually kind of started writing. So just before I had gone to that group, I was writing these short scripts for horror films or horror shorts that were going to be uploaded to a YouTube channel that unfortunately went under right after I sold them a couple of the scripts. And so I was working on those when I met you originally at the Shut Up and Write groups. And through those groups, I have written, we've known each other 3 years now?
Yeah,
4 years,
probably
maybe?
3 years. Or so.
Yeah, through those groups I've written way too much. I wrote a series of 4 novels. I've got a small series of novellas that I have that are all drafted out that I just need to go through and edit. I started an open mic for a little while, which is great.
For writers.
Yeah, for writers. It was, because a lot of open mics around town, they usually have like musicians and stuff, which is lovely. But we didn't really have too many that were writers only kind of stuff. So it was, there were a lot of short stories that I wrote and practiced with doing that. And currently I'm working on a couple of video games. So I've written out the stories and outlined all sorts of stuff for those. So I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm branching out in several different ways, just doing another transitional shift. But yeah, I've been working on all sorts of stuff.
That's very interesting, and as you're talking about it, what the theme I'm hearing behind what you're saying is that these projects, now correct me if I'm wrong, but they tend to have some kind of social or community element or collaborative element. And even if you're writing a novel, one thing I've always known about you is how you hosting the Shut Up and Write events, you're kind of very much involved in the community, and then of course making the open mic, and a video game of course involves probably many other people, programmers and whatnot, and you said scripts, and all of these things are ways of being a writer, yes, but with a very collaborative or social element where you're interacting with other people. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of what I guess got me into writing. Was I loved seeing these YouTube videos of these shorts, and it occurred to me somebody makes them. So I contacted the channel and I said, hey, I would love to work with you guys somehow in any capacity. And they were like, okay, cool. Well, we noticed you have a couple of things listed online as, you're interested in writing and stuff. Do you have any scripts or anything? And I, of course, said at the time, of course I do. I've got a whole library of them. And then before they responded to that, I was like, oh my God, I need to write out some scripts.
Yes.
So I did.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. So I did, and that's how I got started with that, was just that little kind of push. But it was this really, I guess that was my introduction into writing in general, was working with a group of people, rather than kind of being that isolationist writer that maybe I grew into. But yeah, definitely. I mean, the open mics have been lovely. We've done some collaborations. We've got a group of people right now who are working on scripts for a fiction podcast. So like an episodic series of sci-fi type stuff. So we're working with a group of people on that. I guess you're right. I hadn't thought about that. A lot of my writing does usually involve the community.
Yeah, well, and the reason I brought that up is not only because I've noticed that about you, and it's true, I have noticed that about you with all the just to shut up and write alone, which you've been doing for numerous years now, hosting these events, which is fairly rare because there's a lot of people who are not as kind of willing to step up and lead or host something. And for you to do that said a lot about you. And now to hear you fill in some other facts I didn't know about you, about writing scripts for others or helping start a fiction-based podcast. Better for a person to be that way. If it's a novel, you're obviously not going to be. It's not like you're in a room coming up with scenes for Saturday Night Live or something.
Right.
It's different. It's not a by committee kind of situation, or even some maybe screenwriters maybe sometimes have worked that way, so I hear.
Yeah.
So to be productive in your craft takes an element of isolation. I'm sure for you, and it's certainly been the case for me. However, still having a clear willingness to be in relation with others and the sort of generosity behind that, something I've always noticed about you. Not only that, but you've always been really fun to talk to. And because you're easygoing and fun to banter before we have our little writing sessions where we're just making up stuff like we just were, these kinds of qualities go a long way, I think. And I've always liked that about you.
And that's kind of what I've always loved about the groups is that, sometimes you'll get a group where it's all new people and they're very awkward and they're very nervous. Of course, for no reason, because the whole point of Shut Up and Write is to have none of that pressure. You're not doing feedback or reading afterwards. It's just that hour to work on stuff. But after a while, once I get used to the people in the group, we had one time, it was like 20 minutes from an introduction. We were basically, all of us were just laughing not at this person's introduction, but in her introduction, she said something like, back when I was a kid, it was possible to get your finger chopped off by an axe and then go to school the next day, or something like that. Wow. And it got us off on this weird tangent about, back in my day, radioactivity only let you grow 10 tentacles and not 8. Like all this stuff. And suddenly it was like a half hour of us just riffing on each other on this weird story. And that writer ended up... Yeah, that writer ended up like actually writing that into something. And it was a really funny story. But yeah, I've always loved that environment. And I think it's a really healthy environment to write in, especially when everybody's writing different stuff. If it were to be like a romance writers writing group, you're all kind of pressured to write romance. Whereas with Shut Up and Write, it's anything you're writing is A-okay. I mean, you know that. You did a lot of song lyrics, which I think you were the only person ever that I know of at a Shut Up and Write who was writing lyrics or poems. And
I also just had many times when I wasn't writing anything in particular. I just wrote stuff. And probably more than the songwriting lyrics. Mm-hmm. So I definitely was outside the box. Just writing what's on my mind today. Yeah. Which I do a lot.
I've been getting into that. That's where a lot of like my my weird little stories come from. Like odd lines that seem to come out of nowhere but link really well with other concepts in a story or in a poem. That's kind of where I get a lot of my stuff, is I'll just do the kind of free writing of thought. It's lovely. Awesome. Took me a while to get into, but yeah. Sorry.
Yes, you should be.
I apologize,
off track. I apologize. From the grand scheme of this very unchill podcast. No chillness about this.
Yes, I would like to apologize to our live audience of 10,000 people.
Yes. That's only crickets. In the greater Sacramento area. I mean, that's only in Midtown. Okay, then like there's the Pocket area, Arden, other areas, Fair Oaks, and then it just blows up, man.
Yeah, those poor people in those senior living homes, trying to get their sleep. I apologize. Well, that was too loud. I shouldn't.
This is keeping them up. You're helping. Oh
my gosh!
With all the apologies, it's like the decibel level raises on this thing, and it's just helping. You don't know how much it is helping, Nolan. I just gave you a new name.
Oh my gosh.
Nolan.
This is how kings are made.
Yeah, basically this is a king building process. That's the whole thing here. And to get back to the point, Nolan, Nolander, whatever you're gonna be forever known for. What you were talking about to me was the creative possibilities of banter and brainstorming.
Yeah.
Like when you brainstorm and you're talking and then someone comes up with something, and that fun riffing process, which maybe, when I mentioned Saturday Night Live, you think of like actors or comedians kind of coming up with stuff, and they always are. And I've now hung out with some comedians, and the riffing process, coming up with ideas and lines, but then this collaborative talking process, how it, collaboratively, how much you come up with that. That's what it sounds like you just mentioned. And now, why don't you, just for a minute, how would you say that affects your writing when you're not writing in a collaborative mode, but you're writing a novel or something like that? How have you taken that into your own personal writing?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you. That's what I'm here for. That's what they pay me the big bucks for.
Oh my gosh, so wealthy.
I definitely am. Just in good ideas alone.
Hey.
That's where it starts.
You're a rich man. Yeah, I folded that into my own writing. I mean, I do a lot of experimentation now in my own writing. I used to have a very kind of standard format for how I outline stuff. And now, depending kind of on what the project I'm working on is, or what the medium is, because I'm working on podcast scripts, or I'm working on a YouTube script, or I'm doing a novel, or I'm doing a short story, or I'm trying to develop a video game. All of those require, I think, different modes of writing. One of the scripts that I was working on for the podcast, it was a 12 episodes, so very short, but it was going to be once a week, so about 3 months would be the run. It was about a guy who, in his 30s, is trying to, date and meet these women, but over time, these women realize that he actually can see his imaginary friends from when he was a kid, and he can still interact with them. And he discovers then that he can interact with other people's like abandoned imaginary friends, so they all start kind of coming to him. And it's one of those things where he ends up saying, "Get away from me! I need to live, damn it!" Yeah. And then they all leave him.
He's the
and
one
suddenly
that all the imaginary friends come. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Now, just because, so I and all the other people who are going to be listening to this understand. Yeah. When you do a podcast, with this podcast, is it acted out like in a skit form, or is it read?
Right. So it's acted. So it would be voice acted. It would be a lot like an audio drama.
Right.
So that was kind
radio
of the
dramas, what you're talking about, like from olden days.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out a good name for it, because it's technically not radio if it's on a podcast, but anyway, but yes, very similar to a radio drama.
Yeah, like Orson Welles or any other types.
Yes. Yeah. And those are actually really popular nowadays. But through that, I realized that all of this novel writing that I had been doing didn't cut it. I wanted to have this character suddenly go off onto the description of the room, and it wouldn't make sense.
Right.
But because we've got sound, we can make a hardwood floor.
Right.
He can step on the floor and you can hear the wood. He can close his door and you can suddenly hear him kick off his shoes. You don't have to describe all that stuff. And I think kind of what, going back to your point, kind of this riffing idea has led me to is that that flexibility and that kind of charm of playing off of other people really fits in with the world of trying to format. So when you write, trying to format your writing to a certain style. So with the radio stuff, it was all dialogue. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to write it like it was a novel, because that's what I was used to. But when you riff off other people, you kind of learn different styles and different ways to write, in a sense. And I think that's what comedians do too when they riff off of each other. They're kind of allowing somebody else to open up their mental world for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And through that opening up, when you go back to your own stuff in your own isolation, you're still open. Oh. You're suddenly wider, and you can write stuff that's a little more fantastical, or you can decide, oh, hey, I've been doing only novels for such a long time. Maybe this doesn't fit in a novel. Maybe this is a comic book.
Right, you're not limited to one box. It might not be a shoe box. It might be a shoe box instead of like a big piece of luggage. Yeah. Or it might be something else.
And maybe you've only been using luggage as your shoe boxes, but then you invite somebody into your house and they go, what the hell is that? And you go, that's my shoebox. And they say, no, that's luggage for an airport. You go, oh, and I guess so.
Then you buy some tickets, and then you go off to Hawaii or something.
And then you realize you forgot your shoebox at home, and
then you
no
miss
shoes.
your shoebox and your shoes.
Your shoebox.
So there you are in Hawaii in the sand, and it's all good because you're in the beach.
Perfect.
With the luggage that you realize has no clothes in it. And you're like, I wish I brought something, but then
then you realize you're on a nude beach in Hawaii,
and it all works out. See, I told you. So what I heard you say there. Let's see, that you're clearly kind of taking the spirit of your collaborations or your hosting of events or just bantering or whatnot to your own writing. You sort of come at it with kind of an open frame of mind. Will this become a comic book or a movie or a video game or YouTube or a novel? Kind of having this kind of set of different possibilities and a preparedness to go down whichever road feels right. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't know. I laugh a lot when I riff with people. And that laughing, I think, is really good because sometimes you get into your own writing, you get into your head, and you start writing out the story, and by the time you're done with the whole story, you kind of sit there like, am I happy? Like, am I happy with this? Like, the story might not give me those feelings, but when you riff with other people, it's almost like you're practicing to figure out what makes you happy and what makes you laugh. So that when you go back, you can remember those notes, and you can go, oh, I need to remember that this is what, really brought out the giggles earlier.
Yeah.
I can use that in this scene. I can fold it in.
It reminding me of like comic writers, like novelists, like Piers Anthony, who I
Zamp novels.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now, would you say that? Is that sort of something do you write in a comic style, or is it just kind of the spirit of some of these, like this open-mindedness that you bring to other things, or have you tried that? Or
I've tried. I wish I could write in a more comic style. My writing tends more towards starting off very kind of realistic and lighthearted, like close to reality, and then suddenly changes, and through that change, the darker parts of life are revealed. But that's normally what a lot of my writing goes through. But the one with the imaginary friends was kind of my first leap into anything that was mildly comedic. And that's where I learned, and I guess, now that you were talking about when you riff with other people, does that affect your own writing? I guess now that I think about it, that entire script is basically conversations that I've had with other people, because the imaginary friends are all these ridiculous characters. So the main character works in a museum, and every now and then one of the friends will come over and say hi and stuff, but he mostly lives this mundane world of working in a museum, and he's not really sure if he wants to continue working there, if he wants to work outside of the museum or inside the museum, just going up the ladder or anything like that. So then every day when he comes home, he's kind of been sitting with his thoughts by himself, and he opens up the door, and suddenly it's an opium den. His entire living room is an opium den. The imaginary friends are sitting around pretending to be these stoned out of their minds philosophers. The next day he'll come home and it'll be a CSI crime scene. And they're kind of watching television all day and replicating what they see.
Oh, okay.
What they think
very
the world is.
For a second. Okay,
so he lives in an opium den.
So this is stuff on PBS they're watching. Really enriching stuff for kids.
Exactly.
And, opium dens and crime scene stuff.
Yeah,
and
strip clubs.
Yeah, it's going right into these imaginary friends' minds and completely corrupting them.
Exactly. And so he comes home often to these very fantastical scenes, and every now and then he kind of plays with them, but most of the time he's just exhausted from work and he ends up going into his room, and the imaginary friends kind of through that decide, hey, we need to get this guy, a life. And so they try to help him.
Dating? Is that,
so they try to help him on his dates. So he goes on these dates, and
great.
through the dates,
they
end up
imaginary
trying to
wingman.
And failing abysmally because they are ridiculous and they distract him or they make him laugh at something inappropriate. Okay. Yeah.
So that's the shtick in a way.
Yeah.
Like it's like blind date with the imaginary friend.
Right.
Goes awry, see what happens.
And so there's this one woman that he meets that he goes on a date with, and he discovers that her imaginary friend is still around. The woman can't see her imaginary friend, but for whatever reason, instead of leaving her kid when she was younger, this imaginary friend decided to stick around. So the friends decide to try to fold her into the friend group as well, and then it becomes this very strange issue of the girlfriend realizes, oh, you're crazy, to the main character, leaves, but then her imaginary friend is now stuck between, do I stay here with these new friends, or do I stay with this woman who doesn't notice me, who can't see me, who can't interact?
Right, I'm sure it complicates things with him dating her.
Yeah. But that was kind of my first foray into comedy of any sort. Was just having these ridiculous, fantastical characters that were kind of his outlet into anything alive. Yeah, and on a side note, there's a book written within the last 10 years, a novel about a kid with an imaginary friend, and it's all written from the imaginary friend's point of view. I don't know if you've heard of this. I forgot what it was called, but it might be like Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend or something like that. Oh, nice. I found it at Target a few years back, and it was quite good. And I wish I could name it accurately, but you reminded me of some of the psychological issues that imaginary friends go through when they are being released by their kids as they grow up. And it's really quite a good read. Not funny, actually. Kind of touching and strange. And the kid that this imaginary friend is with is is autistic, or on some level autistic, which helps kind of gives interest to the whole thing. Anyway, I loved the imagination of it, and I like the imagination of what you're talking about. And the idea of riffing and coming up with ideas is all about stirring up the imagination, I think, and learning from other people. What are their thoughts? Like you said, what does someone else bring to the conversation, and what could that spark for yourself? Yeah, ideas and whatnot. It's a wonderful game that I've always played as well. With people that are hip to it, people who get it. Yeah, and not everybody gets it. Every now and then I've got like a new coworker at work, and I'll try to play with him, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, okay, got it. It's like if you throw the ball enough and it just falls off of their chest onto the ground, you're like, okay, I guess they're not going to play this thing. Yeah. So, and that's actually kind of normal, for better or for worse, We are creatives, Nolan. We are weirdos. We come up. We have our own, our own way of doing things. Even amongst creatives, I'm sure there are different attitudes on this whole thing. But also, like I said, I think you really excel in that kind of collaborative, creative process. And many people who've done well in the world of the arts or whatever, and philosophers and even scientists and people who generate ideas of some sort, I think generally it's helpful when you are good at communicating with others and hearing from others, learning from others. So that's very cool. Anything else you want to add? Yeah, well, just that idea. It's great to have that feedback. A lot of times at the Shut Up and Write sessions, we'll talk about something afterwards. Your sessions, we didn't really do that a whole lot on the Friday ones, but on the Sunday afternoon ones, I think because they've got the weekend, they have time to kind of hang out and sit and chat afterwards. We talk a lot about various concepts. Sometimes we'll talk about how anti-heroes should act, shoulda, woulda, coulda, but how anti-heroes might act in a certain situation, or we're trying to help somebody work through a knot in their plot. But a lot of times we end up talking about who's your audience. And I think, and myself included, I mean, I've definitely spent a year and a half writing something that when I was done with it, I sent it to a few agents, and they shot me back an email saying, this is not a good idea. I see where you were going, and I see what you meant with this, but if this is really what you wrote from your query letter, it's going to need a lot of changes story-wise in order to make it marketable, which is a whole different monster. But the one thing I really liked from getting that kind of feedback, and the one thing that we talk about at the Shut Up and Write sessions often, is who's your audience. And we talk about how to find your audience and how to think about the audience that your book is for, and not necessarily how to write to your audience. Because a lot of times we have first-time writers, and so saying, just whoever your audience is, write to them. A lot of times doesn't mean anything to them because they don't have an audience. They don't have their name out there.
Right.
People don't really know what they write. And so we talk about trying to find an audience and such, and I think through the riffing, we all kind of learn how other people think and how other people process information and how other people laugh and what other people laugh at and what makes something funny at its core. And I'm applying this to, if we can figure out what makes something funny to its core, we can figure that out with horror. We can figure that out with sci-fi, with fantasy. We can figure that out in all sorts of ways.
Or touches
absolutely.
them or makes them sad in some kind of way or something.
Yeah, and so I think just kind of the importance of riffing. It's funny that we're on this riffing bit, but it really is, like, the more we talk about it, the more I realize how important it is in my life. And I've never thought of it that way, not even once. But I think subconsciously it really helped solidify a lot of ideas that I let float around in my head, and then I throw it out there and somebody reacts a certain way, and I go, oh, that's how other people think about that.
Okay.
So now when I go back to my writing, suddenly I have what other people think about this one section, and I can go from there and I can say, oh, this makes people sad. So I probably shouldn't make the rest of the book really sad, or else nobody's going to want to finish it. I should add like a light moment, or I should throw in something that adds more weight.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear you talk about. And we're having a great discussion here on the Artist Mindset podcast. We're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. All right, so welcome back to the Artist Mindset podcast. And Nolan, we're having a great conversation. We just took a little break and I showed him the backyard and talked about our movie night that we have out there and just drank some water. It was a good time. But prior to that, we're having a great discussion about what to me is your artistic process. Some people may be a little different. Some people are highly collaborative. I've worked with musicians that are highly collaborative and some that are not so much, and their process is different. But I definitely like how you're talking and the ideas you're talking about. What I want to hear a little bit from is if you wish to talk any more specifically about a work that you're particularly proud of, or some so far, in your own creative output. Now, let's hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I'm working on these video game projects, which I'm really excited about. Both because I get to learn how to program, finally. I mean, not that I wasn't able to before, but now I have a reason to learn how to program. And I've always kind of wanted to be into the video game world, just because I think I play video games a little differently than other people. Like, I usually have a notebook next to me, and I'll write down story points.
You mean even just
the video game
as a child, or
yeah, even as a kid, I would have different like save files because I liked what just happened in the story, and so I would go back to an earlier save file and like watch the little video that they had again, or I would kind of analyze. Like, I knew there was a lot going on in that, so I'd go back and play it a few times and like look in the background and look for symbols and cues and such. So I've always wanted to get into video games, and the project I'm working on right now, there was a video game series in 1990 something, 96, 97 possibly, called Shivers, and it was a horror point and click, which means you don't really have a character that you're moving around necessarily. You've got your mouse, and there's like a scene of a front yard. And so you use your mouse to click on the door, and it'll take you to the front door.
Oh, okay.
And then you kind of move in, and you can click on items, and maybe there's a book, and you click on that. So that's what a point and click is.
Oh, okay.
So there was this series that I loved as a kid, and it was... do you ever see the movie Suspiria, by chance?
I don't think so.
Dario Argento. It was he's an Italian horror film director. But his... I don't know, to me, through his movies, the most powerful thing wasn't at all the horror aspect, or even the stories. The stories were great. But for me, if you look at the visuals, he has these intense neon lights in his scenes that shouldn't be there. So the very first scene of Suspiria is this woman coming out of an airport, and you see these blue kind of flashing lights in the airport that look like a natural kind of light. But then the second you get outside, it's this neon green flashing through the rain, and then she gets into this taxi, and the taxi is just this bright, blindingly bright red. And suddenly the story just shoots off into this very strange introduction of her going to this ballet school in Germany. Anyway, point being, these colors were very powerful. So the Shiver series, way back when, was a competitor with a video game called Myst, which was another point and click.
Heard of that?
Yeah, it's very fantasy, but not too fantasy. It's kind of like it's actually very Piers Anthony. Like, it's very accessible. Everybody knows what a centaur is. Everybody knows, what a unicorn is. So Shivers saw that and kind of went the opposite direction and said, there's no real horror game for stuff like that. So they made this game series, and for whatever reason, the colors in it matched almost exactly Suspiria. And at the time I had seen Suspiria and I had just played Shivers, I was maybe like 10 or 11, and it just stuck in my head. The idea that horror doesn't have to be dark. It doesn't have to always be black. And like you see dark silhouettes in the background. Yeah, it could be. It can be powerful. It can focus on the dissonance. So into the video game project I'm working on, really quick, the story is this: the main character, you play as this main character, Kelly, who his brother had run away 3 years before, leaving Kelly to take care of their terminally ill mother. So the mother dies, Kelly's all alone, his brother ran off to nowhere, basically. So 3 years after that, Kelly receives a letter from his brother saying, hey, I really need your help, I joined a cult, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, they just kicked me out, I have nothing, can you come get me? And Kelly kind of struggles a bit. That's the setup. So Kelly struggles a bit, and he goes, fuck, like I need to deal with these issues I've had with my brother, and, he's family, so I need to go get him.
Yeah.
So he's driving out to go get him, and he arrives, it's raining, it's dark, he gets to this bed and breakfast, there's no hotel, it's a very small town, so he gets to this bed and breakfast that has given him instructions of like, hey, here's the key, like here's to get in your room, yada yada. But what he discovers after he wakes up is that all of the roads to town have suddenly been blocked off, there's no way out of town, somebody has cut the cables to his car, and there's nobody around. In the bed and breakfast, there's nobody there. There's nobody in the town. Like, windows have been blocked up, doors have been broken open, and there's nobody around. So the idea is that as the player, you have to go through and figure out the mystery of what happened to your brother and what this strange thing is with the town and the cult. So I'm really excited about this story in a few different ways. But the main thing is that I get to focus on color design and color theory in it. Because I love the idea of horror movies, horror films, horror anything that has these disturbingly bright colors.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Something about, I'm a color guy.
Yeah,
so,
interesting.
So when it comes to visuals and stuff, I'm all for contrast and
well, Nolan, first of all, how much your creative activities are clearly crossing from just writing something on a computer to also programming and thinking more color and design, which is not surprising to me because I know that artists can be that way, but it's still kind of cool, and I didn't know that about you.
Oh.
So as you're working on this video game, would you say that, I mean, what is the bulk of your time on? I mean, I get that what it's really about is idea generation and maybe coming up with the things, but in terms of your actions, are you writing out scripts? Are you also, like you said, doing the program? Are you the chief? Is there a chief programmer here, or are you it right now, or what's the physical actions you're doing right now primarily?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have like a small team of people, 4 that have worked on their own video game and that have shown interest in helping out with this. So I'll be doing a lot of the. So I won't be doing a lot of the heavy programming. I'll be doing a lot of the pseudo coding, which is kind of going through and saying, I want this door to do this when it's clicked on, and to not do this when it's clicked on at a certain point. So that when the programmer goes through, he can just look at what I want the thing to do and set it up so it does that. I've got another guy who's helping me out with some of the, what do you call it? The visual aspects of it. So I have a lot of ideas of like, I want this house to be Victorian. I want the gas station to look like it's an old gas station, but really on the inside it looks very fancy. Like I have these ideas of what I want it to look like, and I'm focusing on building those in a 3D modeling program. So I'm learning that at the moment, and I would say that's probably taking most of my time. But at the same time, as I'm doing that, I'm switching back and forth between that and the inner monologue that the character has throughout the game. So as I'm designing these houses, I'm trying to think of when the player clicks on this window, this is what I want Kelly to say about it. And through that, you learn a lot about his background. Like, he went to school to become an anthropologist, and so he knows a lot of things, like why that style of window is used in the Midwest and not elsewhere, like where that came from. So you kind of pick up on his background through that, and as the story progresses, you pick up more on why he never became an anthropologist, like what stopped him from going to school, which you find out is from his brother. His brother kind of ruined a lot of the family stuff, and so that left Kelly to be the responsible one.
So, if I could translate what I'm hearing is
please.
You in the role of writer, like head thinker, and probably it sounds like director.
Yeah.
Sort of like the George Lucas of this little Star Wars endeavor.
Yeah, a lot of explosions.
Not to be grandiose, but that's what came up for me.
Yeah,
that's what I thought of, and sort of collaborating with sort of people who might be experts in the field of programming and whatnot. But you're providing some of the characterization behind it to give it a psychological basis, so it's not just like nice graphics, but also like interesting backstory and why this guy is messed up or whatever. Yeah, and you're doing a lot of the good thinking, the heavy lifting of the thinking to make a legitimate story. Yeah. Now, I've certainly known that video games can do this stuff. I'm not per se a big video game player, and I kind of stopped in my teens when everyone else was just getting into it.
Right.
But I can certainly have heard and see the kind of cinematic possibilities and the storytelling possibilities.
Oh, yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense, to have things well thought out so that it's interesting. Because I can remember playing, Super Nintendo and Nintendo and stuff, and just being into these characters and stories. It can get very exciting, and of course now even more so, and like the internet and all this stuff, it makes it like a whole world you can inhabit. And I'm sure it's essential to have people who are coming up with ideas, not just coding, although you're doing that too. But I know you primarily as a writer, and think of you primarily as a like the guy with ideas. And it's really interesting, and I didn't know this about you, video game maker that you are.
Surprise.
So I called you a novelist, but clearly you're moving into other things too. And hey, that's whatever works. But the idea creation of story seems to be what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And it took me many years. So before I met you at Shut Up and Write, I actually went through a divorce. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was the cleanest divorce ever on the face of the planet, but what it did was it kind of shocked my system into realizing that I had been pressing myself into a career where I would be doing the same thing every day, day in, day out for the rest of my life. And I hadn't realized it until the divorce, and then
no wonder you
I
like horror.
came back from it.
Yeah. It's like the idea of an early death. You know,
Yeah,
you're well
exactly.
acquainted with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I love having death close by at all times.
So that's why you wanted to do the same thing every day as a career.
Exactly.
Anyway, so you were saying.
So I went through this divorce, and it, like I said, it was this shock of, oh my God, I don't know what my life is right now. And I don't think I ever did know what my life was. And so I started going through, like, I took dance classes. I went back to music. I started writing. I started drawing. I started really sitting down and analyzing the stories that I liked. And I realized through all that, and talking with my dad, I talked to my dad a lot during that process. I realized that when I was a kid, he would read to me Grimm's fairy tales every night, and like well into my like early teens. He would read them to me, and I got like a strong anchor point for stories just in general. And I wouldn't say that all of my stories are perfect by any means, but I can usually see in other stories kind of what makes that story a story, what gives it that core element of entertainment. And so I think,
Yeah, well, I was just inspired by what you're saying. Because you mentioned similar things earlier on. It seems to me that you've had the kind of deconstructing and understanding of stories on your mind since all the way back then when you were playing the games or hearing the Grimm's fairy tales. It's sort of been a sort of a little ongoing side project as you live through life, it sounds like, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why not that I've been jumping from project to project, but why I enjoy working in these different mediums is because different media.
Gosh, you writer, you should know that. Media.
Man, I'll leave. I'm fired. But I think that's why I like working in these different media. Is just that it gives me that practice of, okay, here's a story. Now, how do I connect with my audience with this story? Because not every book is meant to be a book. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like, sometimes people write books and they're so visual, and they're beautifully visual, but you're sitting there reading it thinking, I'd rather watch the movie. Like, this would be an amazing movie. Or, you listen to a radio show and there's so much action going on that you're like, I can't really tell who's fighting who. There's so much fighting, this might be a better comic book. And so I enjoy having the story as this naked thing. And then figuring out what clothing fits that.
And I'm just kind of theorizing here, but there's something about artistic development, maybe, or artistic producer, or something in that realm I would imagine in how you're talking that is that's a valuable thing. It's a niche. Just you understanding, for example, this could be a comic book, or this could be this. It's not everybody comes with that sort of that specialty. Even people in the realms of stories, obviously, some of them just stick to their one thing, comic books, or you're kind of like, not that you're a jack of all trades, but that your interest is sort of, you're at the hub of sort of like a cross section of interest in like the scarecrow with your arms pointing in all these different directions. There's all these roads, and you've been always, it sounds like, interested in how to direct traffic. And maybe a lot more, but that's what that just reminded me of. Is that, would you say that's true?
Absolutely. When we were, I actually had a podcast company that I was going to start, quote unquote company, for these audio dramas, just to make it easier to get out online and to make it easier for advertising and marketing, to have a name. And I got so much enjoyment out of checklists, out of schedules, because in my head, every time I looked at one, like I had a couple of people kind of look at my schedule and go, whoa, that's a lot of stuff. And I go, yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but think about what the end product is going to look like. Like, all this stuff is crazy, but I'm willing to sit here and to go insane and to put myself through the madness of scheduling in order to help this story come out. Because there are so many people with amazing stories. And I'm not saying that I'm like a perfect writer or that I'm a perfect programmer or anything like that. But I see these stories and they float away. Like, a lot of people have this idea and there's something about it that they hold on to, but because an agent said no, or because they kind of lost steam, maybe they got a new job and they had to focus on that, they put this aside, it just kind of disappeared. Because of all that, I can feel the stories like there. They'll talk about it and I can see like the spark. And I'm like, no, keep working on the story. I think that's why I like running Shut Up and Write, because a lot of times now people will talk to me about stuff like that. And I'll say, hey, that's like, don't let go of that one. That's like a really good story. Or I'll bring up like, hey, maybe that's not like a novel. Because somebody will say, I'm struggling with this massive fight scene. It's spanning 4 chapters. And it's like, okay, well, that's really visual. Like, maybe there's another way you can do that in order to get the story out. Like, I personally, I don't care about the close, personally. But I think that story is so vital that, I mean, anybody who sits down and is willing to put in that many hours of writing, even if it doesn't come out as a good product, cares clearly about something in that story enough to put their time and energy into it. And I think that's a good thing to trust. Like, trust that.
Oh, yeah.
There's something there. Trust it. Maybe you've talked yourself into working it a certain way that isn't necessarily best for the story. So maybe take some of that back.
Yeah.
Like, work back a little bit and then figure out a different way to do it.
Well, you sound like an advocate for a fledgling writer or idea person, but also someone who's an advocate for the possibilities of change or transformation, or like finding like you said, a lot of what you're talking about is, well, this might belong in this medium instead of this one, and that's that's a interesting, again, kind of perspective, a skill set that could provide a lot of value to someone who might be hitting a wall because they think they're writing a novel, and then you're like, no, this is the next Fight Club. Come on, man, it's got to be a movie, which I think also was a novel. But anyway, anyway, you know what I'm saying? Just like you kind of being able to go in there and either encourage people, but kind of pragmatically help people open up to new possibilities. There's a lot of value in that, not in above and beyond your own creative skills, but the sort of social help you can help people with that. Yeah, it's a lot of great things. So anyway, it's a very good topic. Before we wrap up our cool conversation, is there any place you want to direct people to at this point, website, or get in contact with you, or Facebook, Instagram? Now would be the time to just share your digs, your digits, or whatever. I don't know what the right term is. But I have a lot of my stories actually up on Facebook. I just kind of post them, especially a lot of my short stories. You can also see some of my videos from the open mic that I recorded. The open mic's called Sacramento's Naked Narratives. So you can find me on Facebook at Nolan Neikirk, or Instagram if you're interested in any of the color stuff I talked about. I do a lot of acrylic painting, and I play with colors there. So just like a true artist. Video games, painting, script writing, novels. I love it. Yeah,
but you can find me on Facebook, and any of my other links, I'm on there.
Awesome. Well, Nolan, I feel like we just brushed upon the creative universe that we could expand upon, just like He-Man or something, if we wanted to.
We are the masters of the universe.
Exactly. And, again, it's just really great to talk to you, and also really look forward to seeing what you have to do, because it's very clear to me. And I always liked you, but I never saw you outside of the Shut Up and Write context. It's very clear to me how open you are and how your willingness to get your fingers dirty and whatever the clay of whatever you're working on with other people. I know that's going to lead to some really awesome things. So I wish you much success.
Oh, thank you very much, Chris.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. I'm going to close with a little improvisation. And I wanted to say to everybody listening, thank you for tuning in to the Artist Mindset podcast. And as always, I just want you to know that I do this work because I think, just like Nolan here, that there's a lot of great creatives out there with a lot to say. And if anything you hear here helps encourage you, makes you feel like it's possible to do something, then I feel that I am doing my job here. So with that, thank you for tuning in. Here's a little music for you. Ta-da! Thank you very much.